The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Tuesday, August 9th, 2016. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a jam-packed show tonight, so I have to jump right into it without all of the preliminaries. But obviously, I can't start without thanking all of my patrons, all of my supporters. We can't do it without you. And now is as good as time as any for you to go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron. Yes, I know I say it every single night, but we can't do it without you. And we need more of you. Right now we have 111 patrons. Thank you all so much. Let's see if we can get it to 150. With that being said, I have an exciting show for you tonight. Tonight I am going to be speaking with Thomas Frank, the author of Listen Liberal, or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People. We'll briefly discuss his book because I'm a big fan of his work ever since What's the Matter with Kansas. He'll be joining us at about 9:30. But we also have to talk about things that are happening in the news, new emails. You know, people have to be. I don't know why people will send emails and not realize that somebody's going to read them and get a hold of them. So new emails about the State Department, Huma Abedin, Hillary Clinton, and favors coming from favors on behalf of the Clinton Foundation. We'll discuss that. We have to discuss Donald Trump because Donald Trump regularly inserts himself into he's a presidential candidate, so I guess that's a natural thing. But he regularly makes an ass of himself and says something absurd. So we're going to talk about his most recent absurdity, which we'll see if it goes. If you've been paying attention at all, then you know by now he alluded to a Second Amendment remedy with regard to Hillary Clinton. Now, if you hadn't heard about it, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear that? So we'll discuss that in a moment. Today is the second anniversary of the shooting of Michael Brown. So I want to talk about that in context of everything from the reason I'm even doing my show to the 2016 election. And I want to talk about white privilege in the context of this election. A lot of people have been asking about whether or not voting third party is white privilege. I kind of want to address that a little bit. So a lot of things going on. Let's start with Donald Trump. So I'll play the clip and I'll let you tell me what you think.
Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. By the way, and if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But
all right. So, I mean, where do you start? Second Amendment remedies. I mean, I don't even have to tell you. I think any person who's been paying attention since Sarah Palin understands what people mean when they say a Second Amendment solution or Second Amendment people will take care of it or however you phrase it. When you allude to the Second Amendment, you allude to violence rhetorically or figuratively or literally. You're alluding to violence. And this has gotten, I guess you would expect the kind of response that it has gotten. So but you would also expect people on the right to try to justify it and to explain it away. And so, of course, the explanation is, well, he's referring to voting. He's not talking about violence. He's talking about voting. Let's see if I can bring up some examples of people trying to justify it. Here's one. Let's see if this displays on your screen. Well, this is from a pretty popular Twitter guy. He says, retweet if you'll defend the Second Amendment if a tyrannical government tries to take it away. So he actually didn't even try to explain what Donald Trump says. He doubled down on what Donald Trump said, that he wants to defend the Second Amendment if a tyrannical government tries to take it away. And he uses a quote that's attributed to George Washington. When government takes away citizens' right to bear arms, it becomes a citizen's duty to take away a government's right to govern. George Washington, because, you know, the type of weapons George Washington was referring to was automatic assault rifles, right? AR-15s. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But in terms of the people who try to explain it away, you know, this is pretty much the argument that you see here. This is from someone, a Twitter star. I repeat, only left in media hear a call for assassination. Second Amendment people hear call to voting booth. Right, because in this scenario, after election has already taken place, meaning Hillary Clinton has been elected to be president, because she's in a position, according to Trump, to appoint a judge to the Supreme Court. And at that point, she would, quote unquote, take away your Second Amendment right. At what point in that equation could you vote? She's already been elected president. So if that's what you're hearing, not only are you nut jobs, but you're also intentionally, I mean, I don't even, this is such a dumb conversation. I don't really have anything substantive to say other than to point at this out, right? So the person who said this, obviously, if you go a little bit further on her page, Emily gets her gun, and she's has on her front page her holding a gun, right? So of course, she's going to come to the defense of Donald Trump recommending a second remedy solution to Hillary Clinton, notwithstanding the fact that, no, I won't even go into the arguments about the Second Amendment. I'm not even going into that. Let's just say the Secret Service has stated that they are aware of the statement. And if anybody else had said this, a person not running for office, they would most certainly be under investigation. They would get a knock on the door from the Secret Service. So I wonder what his Secret Service attachment detail has done. Did they have to shift gears and go from protecting him to investigating him all in one breath? Or was there a separate Secret Service detail sent over to confront that Secret Service detail so that they could get to how did they work this out? Because somebody is going to have to ask a question. And I wonder if this is the first time we've seen a presidential candidate who has not necessarily an investigation, but has had to be questioned by the Secret Service because of a thinly veiled threat against another candidate. This has to be precedent setting. And so one last thing, even Fox News, folks, Fox News even knows that this is anyway. Listen to Geraldo and the Five on Fox News. This was them a few minutes ago.
What do you think? What the hell? I know. Second Amendment. What was he talking about? Well, I mean, is he talking about what I think he's talking about? He clarified saying that the Second Amendment. He didn't mean that he wants someone to kill her. Yes, he did.
This is Fox News. So even Fox News knows exactly what the hell is going on. And so we're having a debate here at the studio. Like, is Donald Trump okay? So at this point, I think Donald Trump is safe to say that I'm not unreasonable to believe that Donald Trump is trying to sabotage his own campaign. I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory, because either that or he is by far the most imbecilic person that we have ever allowed this much power and attention and to be this close to the presidency. Because if he's not doing this intentionally, he is the most ridiculous and dangerous person we've come across in a long time. I just don't know if he's sincerely making all of these mistakes all the way from day one, from Mexicans are rapists all the way to Second Amendment Hillary. And he sincerely made those, or not, doesn't even think they're mistakes, but he thinks that they are the right thing to say. Man, even if he's like playing a character, right? There's a third scenario, right? He's playing a character because he genuinely wants to be president, and he believes that this particular character is the winning character. This is the guy that, this is the character that his audience will obviously be drawn to. And it's worked. It's 100% worked because he has crushed the Republican establishment. He has taken the party like the movie with Tom Hanks. Look at me. I'm the captain of this ship now. This is, he has literally taken over this party. As I get a tweet from him. Anyway, no, that's not. Yeah, I get tweets from Donald Trump because every now and then I like to troll him and post something, something simple, nothing serious, just something like, go home, Trump, and his followers lose their mind just with stuff like that. But either, there's three scenarios. One, he's just an imbecile and he's a dangerous person because he doesn't realize what he says or doesn't care what he says, right? So that's scenario one. Scenario two is that he's very calculating and he's doing this intentionally to lose for Hillary Clinton. I don't think that's so far-fetched at this point. And then last but not least, he's doing this as a character because he knows this is what the Republican base genuinely wants. Whatever the case may be, I can't understand how he goes further, with the exception that nothing has seemed to stop him before. I would be curious to see if he goes up in the polls after this. So over the summer, he went up in the polls because the media was enjoying covering him and giving him all the coverage they could possibly give him. Well, now the media enjoys attacking him. I think it's fair to say everyone can look at the media coverage and everyone is attacking him. Even Fox News, they're not giving him a break, right? They may not be attacking him, but they're not giving him a break. So I'm curious to see if this will take him up in holy crap, I think I busted my microphone. If he goes up in the polls after today, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you President Donald Trump. Because if he can survive this, I mean, that's an indictment on America, yes, but that dude can survive anything. All right, 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. What do you think? Which one do you think it is? Do you think he's playing a role because he knows he can win with this role? Do you think he's playing a role to sabotage himself so that he can lose for Hillary Clinton and help Hillary Clinton get elected? Or do you think he's just that ignorant, imbecilic, and has absolutely zero F's to give? I think it's I don't know. I'm going for the latter. I think he is just that imbecilic and doesn't really care what he says or doesn't feel like he has to ever bite his tongue. All right. So while you guys call in about that, I want to shift gears really quick. Let's talk about Huma Abedin and the State Department emails in association with the Clinton Foundation. So this came out today, and it's funny how this dropped on the same day as as Donald Trump upped the ante. But so the State Department emails have come out showing the State Department asking to find a job and to take care of a Clinton Foundation associate. Judicial Watch is a part of Judicial Watch's Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. There are connections between Clinton's role leading the State Department and her foundation and her family foundation. The subject line was simply a favor. And in the body it read, we have actually, hang on, let me just go straight to the email itself. So the subject line, it's from Doug Band. It's dated in 2009. So Hillary Clinton and Huma were both in the State Department. And the subject line is just simply a favor. And so it starts off, hi, Doug. I really appreciate the opportunity to go on the Haiti trip. It was an eye-opening experience, seeing blah, 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 blah. The follow-up email after that, the response was that it was a very short response. Most of it has been redacted, but they're saying it's important to take care of X. A favor. It's important to take care of X. Now, just from that much, we can't draw a conclusion of what this was about. But if you read up in the email thread, you'll see the context. And the context was provided It was provided by Cheryl Mills. Now, Cheryl Mills has ended up, and you'll see her in the background picture here with Hillary Clinton at her time as Secretary of State. Cheryl Mills has been one of the chief lead staff members for Hillary Clinton at the State Department, implicated in quite a few situations just like this, including Raj Fernando. You remember the Chicago exchange broker, commodities exchange, I believe, where he was awarded a prestigious and important position on a national security board reviewing nuclear policy. And Raj Fernando, who has zero experience in nuclear policy or foreign policy for that matter, was added to that board as a result of his contributions, allegedly as a result of his contributions to the Clinton foundations. Now, this is exactly par for the course, right? This goes right in line with the behavior we saw with Raj Fernando. So the first email comes from Doug Band in a conversation that he was having about a trip to Haiti. Huma Abedin actually sent this next email, and in this email, CC'd to Huma Abedin from Doug Band, saying that it is important to take care of a certain individual who has been redacted. The final email was from Huma Abedin, CC'd to Cheryl Mills, and it says, "We have all had him on our radar. Personnel has been sending him options." Let me repeat that. We have all had him on our radar. Personnel has been sending him options. Now, to be clear, this email, this exact message is coming from Huma Abedin, who is still the personal assistant and possibly chief of staff, probably only second to Neera Tanden of the Center for American Progress. But she's very connected with Hillary Clinton, probably next to Hillary Clinton right now. Huma Abedin sent this email to Doug Band and CC to Cheryl Mills, April 22nd of 2009, saying that we have all had him on our radar. Personnel has been sending him options. And this individual is a person who is connected to the Clinton Foundation. They can draw that from the Haiti trip and some other information. But this is done as a favor. Now, this has not made a lot of headline news today because Donald Trump and his Second Amendment, but it's par for the course for what we've seen in the time with Hillary Clinton at the State Department, going completely counter to her testimony. No surprise, right? But completely counter to her contention that that there was a veil separating the Clinton Foundation from the State Department. Well, now this is the second individual who has been associated with the Clinton Foundation who now has a favor called in allegedly because of their time at or their contributions and participation with the Clinton Foundation. Raj Fernando, who subsequently resigned immediately as soon as it became public, thanks to some investigative reporting by ABC News, and now an individual whose name has been redacted. But this email chain is actually implicating Cheryl Mills, Huma Abedin, and Doug Band. Now, we can't concretely conclude, excuse the alliteration, that this is quid pro quo, right? But because we don't have the name of the individual, we don't know exactly, because we don't have the name of the individual, we can't say what their contribution was to the Clinton Foundation, right? And because we don't know their contribution to the Clinton Foundation, we can't adequately conclude or with full integrity conclude that this was the type of favor that we all suspect it being. But what we can say is that this is par for the course. This is exactly the type of behavior that we have seen documented by many emails that have been released from Hillary Clinton's time at the State Department. What does it matter at this point? Hell, I don't know, because you have to choose between, her and the guy who's looking for a Second Amendment. I said this today. Somebody said that this election has become a cluster F. And I had to agree. I'm like, yes, this is a cluster F because we're stuck between a oligarchical neoliberal, an efficient oligarchical neoliberal, and an imbecilic oligarchical neoliberal who is adored by Nazis, right? So you have Hillary Clinton, who's going to be the most efficient neoliberal. She knows where all the bodies are buried. She knows where all the bones are in all the closets. She knows how to get it done. She's going to be an efficient mastermind of this political system. Or you could choose an imbecilic person who is going to, just as much as Hillary Clinton is going to serve the oligarchy, so is Donald Trump. Don't fool yourself. Donald Trump is representative of the oligarchy. Why would he do something to undermine himself? It just doesn't follow. But he's an imbecile. He represents the oligarchy, and he's a beneficiary of neoliberalism. So why would we ever expect him to do something to undermine neoliberalism? He's not going to break up this system. The only difference then is that one is efficient, one is potentially imbecilic, but also adored and loved by white nationalists and Nazis. So yes, this election has become a cluster F of I can't wait until it's over. That's really what's become. All right, let's take a couple of callers before we start with our interview with Thomas Frank. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hi, my name is Isha, and
Hey, Isha.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. So if you look at through the emails, there is one email in which Band asks Huma Abedin to put this Nigerian businessman by the name of Gilbert Shagori in touch with somebody of substance in Lebanon. And the thing about Gilbert Shagori is that he is as shady as they get. He was convicted of embezzling money in Switzerland. And like sometime in 2006 or something, like they disappeared, like they got the charges wiped out. And he's also known to have connections with Boko Haram. And Hillary Clinton was pretty late in classifying Boko Haram as a terrorist organization, even though they've killed more than ISIS. So basically, so the email is dated like sometime in April of 2009, where they where the band says Shagori is the key guy. Shagori is the key guy there in Lebanon, and apparently you're supposed to connect Jeffrey Feltman to Shagori. Is the email. And Shagori has quote unquote, donated somewhere between 1 and 5 million.
Yep.
And he's also pledged $1 billion to the Clinton Global Initiative. So this is worth investigating, and it's a lot dirtier. But like I said, unless like there's something like I will do this thing that I normally wouldn't do in exchange for money, it's not going to count as bribery. But it's something that should be unsettling for all of us. Yeah,
it's definitely it's consistent with everything else that has been coming out about Clinton's time at the State Department. But the sad reality is exactly what you just said, Isha, is that unless there's a smoking gun, there's pretty much nothing that's going to come of this. Unfortunately. So yeah, so actually that's another, so out of 296 pages of records, about 44 that were not previously recovered were recovered today, and one was about both of them involved Doug Band and Huma Abedin, right? So again, it's par for the course. Let's grab this next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, it's David. Just wanted to kind of feed off something you said a few minutes ago about the emails. Not exactly what you just finished on, but
go ahead.
You had noted, I know you're pressed for time because Thomas Frank's coming on. I can't wait for that one. But you had said that the media hadn't focused on this because of the Trump statement, and that might have been a distraction. But I would pose the question of, would they have focused on it anyway, or would they have given it much thought because of the attention that they haven't given on the leaks and everything else? If we don't rely on independent media, whether it be you and the rest of Progressive Army shows, if it's QIT, who some are upset with right now, if it's not Ring of Fire and other sources, though, can we really rely on the traditional corporate sources to really give nod to it.
So-
Also, we were trying to give you some notes in production.
Yeah. So here's the other thing, right? So thanks for the call, David. There's almost this level of what's the point? Because like Isha just said, unless there's a smoking gun, we're just kind of reiterating what either you believe happened or you just don't want to see it, right? People either see this and say, yep, that's pretty consistent with the Clintons' time in state, with Hillary Clinton's time as state, right? And it's problematic. And there's all sorts of things that go dirtier than just, scratch my back, I scratch your back. You see it or you don't, right? But then you get to the point where it's like, oh, okay, what's the point? Now, that would be the most benefit of the doubt I can give the media would be an editor. An editor would say, where are we going with the story? Like, what's it going to do? What's it going to accomplish? Hillary Clinton is going to be the next president, right? At this point today, not like 6 months ago when something could be done. I'm talking about right now, today. So would they cover it? The best thing I could say is that as an editor, I would say, we can let's publish it. We'll get some clicks. Right. But what's actually going to be the substance of it and come substantive of it? Probably nothing. And you have a lot of editors who look at it that way and would not publish it and would not drive it on their television networks because the producers on the television network, because it's not the story that's going to drive ratings. Now, on the flip side of it, if I take a more cynical view of it, no, they wouldn't cover it because why would they? They're doing it, they're doing everything they can to undergird the establishment, and that means protecting the establishment candidate. So, do I think they would have covered it? No, but I think Donald Trump gives them a very convenient out. The only thing people are talking about right now is Donald Trump's Second Amendment remedies. That's it. And because of that, that the urgency that they place around. And I mean, let's again, we'll talk about this after the interview, because even if you believe Donald Trump is saying these things just to help Clinton on the worst case, or just to play a character, you still cannot ignore the fact that he's saying these things and that there are some people who will take his words and bring them into action. I mean, ask Gabby Giffords, right? That was right around the time that the Second Amendment remedy was at its height. Former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, who was shot by and has permanent brain damage. And then other people were killed in that shooting because of the Second Amendment remedy rhetoric. So we can't ignore it, no matter what you think the reason is. And Donald Trump consistently gives the media something that they can quickly deflect to. But what are you going to do? You can't ignore it. All right. So I'm excited tonight to be joined by Thomas Frank, the author of the book, Listen Liberal, or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People. I'm a fan of his. The first book I think I've read of his was What's the Matter in Kansas, or with Kansas. And it started unpacking how a lot of Republicans vote against their best economic interest. And he unpacked the reasons why. And I was excited to get this book because the level of analysis he did with the Republican Party, he turned around and now did with the Democratic Party. And it was meat and manna for me, because I was really thinking about some of these things at the same time that the book came out. And it's always good to be able to read someone who's put things into context that you've been thinking about. And so we're trying to connect with them now, just trying to get video connected. As soon as we get the video connected, we'll bring him on. There we go. Mr. Frank, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for joining me. My audience is excited about this conversation. We want to talk briefly about your book, and then I want to actually bring it to life and put it in context of this election, because there's so many things happening to the Democratic Party right before our eyes. So let's just start with a real quick softball. Why did you write the book? What compelled you to write this book?
Listen Liberal?
Yeah, Listen Liberal.
Well, you were talking about what's the matter with Kansas a second ago, and I have written 3 books about the conservatives, the Republican Party and the conservative movement. But when you look at the broad sweep of where we are, and you can't blame everything on them. There's it's a two-party system, and there's this other half of the world that I hadn't that I hadn't been writing about. But it also it's also the challenge of the thing. If you're going to be, in my opinion, if you're going to be an honest commentator, you have to take on the subjects that are hard as well as the subjects that are easy. And writing about the conservatives, it's like making fun of Trump. Like it's too easy right now.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. I was reading somewhere on Facebook. There was one particular scholar who said the reason she won't even give Donald Trump any of her intellectual brain space, is because of exactly what you said. Like it's just too easy. So part of this
it's too easy, and it makes you feel stupid just in even engaging.
It does.
Seriously.
It's obvious, right? The things about Trump is obvious. I like what you said though, that because this is the same space I was in. I was in the same mental space, I would say about 2006, 2007, where I could clearly see the shift in American politics towards the right. And I can see the part of the conservative movement that was causing it. But then later on, I would say around 2008, when I saw President Obama pick Timothy Geithner and I saw everything happening with the bailout, I was like, wait a minute. Hold on, something else is afoot here. And so for you're saying that you spotted that and you dug into it and you discovered, or you just realized that this is an intentional shift towards the right by the corporate ring of the Democratic Party to embrace policies that are more beneficial for corporate America versus the average American. Just unpack the basic.
Yes, absolutely. There. Well, that's the big subject, and I know you've spoken about it so many times. But for me, Obama's election was a big turning point in all sorts of ways. I was very enthusiastic about it. I don't think I've ever talked to you about this before. I don't think I've ever talked to you, period, before.
Yeah, that's our first time.
But I used to live in Hyde Park, which is this neighborhood in Chicago. In fact, that's where I wrote What's the Matter with Kansas, and he was our state senator, Barack Obama. And I once met him at a house party. You'd see him at community gatherings and everything. And I was a big fan. I thought he was a great man. I still do, to a certain degree. I still think he's. We'll get to that later. That I have mixed feelings about him now, because I want him to be a great president. But okay. So anyhow, he comes into office, right? And in 2008, and I was so excited. One of the reasons that I was most excited about voting for him was that he signified to me the end of the grip of the Clintons on the Democratic Party and the Clinton faction on the Democratic Party. The Democratic Leadership Council, the sort of centrist group. I was never a big fan of Bill Clinton back in the 1990s. Bill Clinton had really made me angry with all the bank deregulation, welfare reform. The big crime bill of '94, which at the time, nobody even talked about, but it infuriated me. And so Barack Obama looked to me in 2008 like this was the chance to finally break the grip of that faction on the Democratic Party. And he gets elected. And it's a wonderful thing, and he looks like exactly the right man for the moment. He looks like the Franklin Roosevelt of our time, steps into office at the moment when the country needs him most, in the middle of this terrible financial crisis. And what does he do? Who does he bring in with him? I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It's the same, but it's the same people, It's Larry Summers.
Yeah.
Clinton's old Treasury Secretary. He brings in all of these Robert Rubin proteges. He brings in Tim Geithner, as you mentioned. You just go right to, and of course Hillary herself. You go right down the list, and it's like he capitulated completely to this faction that I thought he had been elected to. to toss them out. But it's worse than that, because then he proceeded to never really do what the country, or what people like me anyway, expected him to do, to get tough with Wall Street, to take the opportunity presented by the bailouts, by the recession, to really transform the economy of this country. And he had the power to do it. The country was at his back. 1 million people on the Mall here in Washington for his inauguration.
Yeah.
The man was beloved. He had a majority in both houses of Congress, and it was just, and so that's really the beginning of the book, is when I ask that question: what happened with this guy? History dealt him 4 aces. How did he come away with so little? That's the question that I ask, and then the rest of the book is me trying to answer, grappling with that problem and trying to answer the question.
So it's one of the. So my natural train of thought, and trying to answer that question myself, was to start treading into the area that you have in the book, where you see that this wasn't a mistake in a lot of ways. Like, if you go back and read Dreams of My Father, and you hear him espouse some of the things
I love
that he
that
wrote.
book, by the way. I thought that was a great book.
It's a great book, but then, like, there's one section where he started talking about what he believes politically, and he starts going down talking point after talking point. He could very well have just been a Republican saying the same exact thing. And so then it started dawning on me, this wasn't a mistake. I think a lot of people see Obama as being weak and not able to get done what he wanted to get done. But how much of this do you think was intentional? This is exactly the strategy that he wanted to go in with.
Yeah, well, that's the conclusion that I came to after looking at these things, was that the only way to explain the results that he got is that's how he wanted things to unfold. That he played the situation with Wall Street, for example, exactly the way he wanted to play it. I mean, that's the only reasonable conclusion to come to. Once you've looked at all the evidence. By the way, I know the passage you're thinking of. I don't think it's in Dreams from My Father. I think it's in the other one.
You're right. It's in.
Audacity. Oh, I've got it right here. Yeah. I've got the book right behind me here. His other memoir, the one about his time in the Senate.
Yeah, that's
Audacity of Hope. And I read that one too. And it's a funny thing, because I read that and I thought that was all. Are we allowed to curse on your show?
Yeah. No, we're go for it.
I thought that was all just bullshit. He was just saying that to make people happy. The other stuff that he was saying, like when he gave that great speech at Cooper Union, I thought that was the real deal. But all the nice stuff about there is no red states, there is no blue states, there's only the United States. I thought that was just to reel in the suckers. And it was the opposite. He meant that stuff. It was the stuff that I thought was so great.
Yeah.
Was the stuff that was just window dressing.
Yeah, and he had that ability, right? I don't want to make this a referendum.
He still does. He still does. I saw his speech at the Democratic Convention. At the Democratic Convention, they're out there waving signs that say "No TPP," right?
Right.
Everybody's really angry at that, and he comes out, and they are, ecstatic. Yeah. He's the greatest man there ever was. People still fall. I still fall for him. I love the way he speaks.
Let's go to that dissonance. That dissonance that was on display at the Democratic Convention, which I think embodies is best personified by what you wrote in the book, right? There's this dissonance that we saw on display. You saw no TPP signs everywhere. But here comes the Democratic champion for the president for the TPP on stage, and they simultaneously erupt into tremendous uproar of applause for this president. So here you have the Democratic Party ostensibly fighting with itself over the TPP, and we have no one else to blame at this point but the Democratic Party. What did you think about that tension, and what does that say about what the Democratic Party really is today?
But that's the entire convention. This is I've been trying to write about this ever since I got home from Philadelphia, and I've had a lot of trouble with this because it's not because it's not a good subject, but because it's hard for me to nail it down. But there's many examples of this. Of, say, Elizabeth Warren gave this great speech where she's deploring inequality and the way the bankers completely got off the hook, and it's like, but this is. Your team did this, your guys did this. There were many speeches like this. Hillary herself, in her speech, said, that we are the party of working people. Okay, that's great. I wish they were.
Right.
If you go out into the parking lot and they've got this big tent for Uber, they struck a special deal with Uber to take the delegates to and from the convention. It's like Uber and the Philadelphia taxi cab drivers, they don't really get along.
Yeah.
It's not, but there's they're contradicting themselves all over the place. They're, reaching out to the peace faction, and then at the same time reaching out to the militarist faction on the same day.
Yeah.
They don't know where they are. They want to be all things to all people. And what's really funny is they're going to be, because the Republicans have just completely self-destructed. So there is no real challenge to them this year. She's going to sail in, I think, without any serious challenge. The only real challenge was in the primary.
Right. Which we could probably talk about at length.
Yeah, for a long time.
So let's go with that next thing that you just mentioned, right? Because one of the things that you talk about in the book is the similarities. Now, once you unpack the Democratic Party from the perspective that you unpacked it, you start seeing the similarities between the Democratic and the Republican Party, which they're essentially both two opposite sides of the same coin, the coin of neoliberalism. So unpack that a little bit, and then I want to tie it into where the party is going now that there is no viable Republican Party.
Yeah. Well, God, isn't that just a mind-blowing subject right there?
Yeah.
But let's go back to the history of this thing, okay? Because it's an easy thing to write a book that's just a catalog of the Democrats' failures, like all the different ways that they screwed up over the years, all the different ways that they sold out their base and they betrayed, this demographic and that, and this part of their constituency and that. And there's many examples, and they're all in there, or a lot of them are in there, but that's not good enough. What I wanted to do in Listen Liberal was to explain why they do this and come up with a consistent theory for it. And you can find it when you start to dig, because the Democrats have actually been, over the decades, have been pretty open about why they do the things that they do. And it goes back to the early 70s when they decided that, this is during the Vietnam War, after the 68 convention, you've got the kids in the street fighting with the Chicago police, all this kind of thing is going on. And the Democrats decided that they wanted to make a break with their traditional constituent groups. They wanted to make a break with who they had been in the past. And they decided they didn't really want to be the party of organized labor anymore.
Right.
And this is not something that they did secretly. This is something that it was much discussed at the time. And it's also something that is easy to understand, because a lot of unions back then were, big, hulking, slow-moving, very white, very top-heavy, or not particularly democratic organizations that supported President Johnson on the Vietnam War. And so the Democrats are saying, look, this is kind of, we want to be identified with a different group that's much more progressive, much more liberal, and that's what they call the affluent white-collar suburbanites or white-collar professionals is what they call them. And they said, and they were very open about this. This is who we wanted. They wanted to identify the party with instead. This is this very admirable group, and you can really understand why they made that decision in those days, in the late 60s and early 70s. The idea that working people would soon be, just have their fortunes completely ruined for them by the, the global economy, that wasn't even on the radar screen back then. Working people were doing really well back then. They were in the middle class, that kind of thing. The idea that the economy that deindustrialization would overtake huge parts of the Midwest, and that's all the things that have happened, none of that was on the radar screen back then. So that, they did this, I think, in good conscience, but they've stuck with it over the years and over the years and over the years and over the years, and now we're in a very different situation. And where working people, the working class generally, is watching their way of life
disappear.
Disintegrate.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party doesn't really give a damn. Instead, they scold these people. Open up the New York Times and read Tom Friedman. They scold these people and say you should have gone to college, and maybe you did go to college, but you didn't study the right subject,
Exactly.
or you didn't get a STEM degree or whatever it is. You're not in an innovative industry. It always goes back to being your own fault. But what I trace in Listen Liberal is the Democrats, when they embraced this new constituency, the affluent white collar professionals, when they embraced this new group, they embraced an entire theory of politics, an entire way of looking at the world. And it's the word that you just used before, which I don't like to use, but it's neoliberalism. Mm-hmm. It's what they call it in England. And but we all know what that means. They embraced what they call globalization, high tech, what they call creative industries, but above all, industries that employ professionals. And so you go down the list of the industries that Democrats really admire: Silicon Valley, right, big pharma, but above all, the answer: Wall Street.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when they this begins, their sort of love affair with Wall Street begins during the Clinton years. Clinton, by the way, was one of the greatest, most dedicated to this sort of theory of politics, where it's all about the professional class. That's who he was. One of his cabinet secretaries, Robert Reich, who's actually a very good guy now, but had actually written a whole book about this subject. Mm-hmm. And Clinton reached out to Wall Street, and the whole theory there is that Wall Street is one of these creative industries. It employs these very sophisticated, highly educated people with advanced degrees. Mm-hmm. It's people just like us. Mm-hmm. It's people just like the people at the top of the Democratic Party. And that's the story. It's their love affair with this group of people, this people at the very top, at the very pinnacle of American society, mm-hmm, who the Democrats have come to love. And so it's a kind of liberalism of the rich, is the way I always put it. And I'm sorry, I talk way too much. I mean, you got me going there, and I just can't. Sometimes I can't stop, and I know I need to shut up so that you can answer.
No. It's fine. I trust me. If my audience was getting disengaged, I would know by now. So feel free. they would have let me know. This is very interactive. So you're getting some great feedback already. So okay, feel free to go in. But let's drill down a little bit further. Then, so they pulled this off in the late 60s, early 70s. They carry it through to fruition. And now we're at this point where I'm calling it like the final form of the DLC. Like it's the truncating of the bigoted class, whatever you want to call them, those who won't ever agree on social issues on the right. Then they're shedding. We see Hillary Clinton is doing an intentional, in my opinion, shedding of the progressive left. And what you're left with is this centrist party that embraces globalization, Wall Street, and they happen to be socially liberal. And I just didn't expect it to happen so quickly, but thanks to Trump, Trump, it seems like
Trump has made all these things possible, hasn't he?
Exactly.
Well, they have the Democrats had a saying back in the 90s. I don't know if the Democrat who came up with this saying, but if you go back and look at newspaper headlines from the early days of the Clinton administration, they had this saying that people, these different constituent groups on the left of the Democratic coalition, had nowhere else to go.
Right.
And there's two places in particular where you see this. One is, do you remember the Sister Souljah moment?
Oh yeah,
remember this?
Absolutely.
When Clinton contrived to insult Jesse Jackson to his face in front of the TV cameras of the nation. And that was all the newspaper columnists were like, well, he can do that because they've got nowhere else to go. And then the year, that was 92, the next year, Clinton got NAFTA passed over the objections of organized labor. And he just ran the bulldozer over these guys, with his right-hand man, Rahm Emanuel, and the other one, Bill Daley, the Chicago guys. Were the ones that got this thing done. And again, all the newspaper columnists were like, well, so what? They've got nowhere else to go. And that's Hillary Clinton is looking at people like that again, and that's the logic. Look, that is always what they do, and they will do that forever. I mean, even as they were talking about how much they loved working people, there were all of these Wall Street people there in Philadelphia throwing these, I imagine, very extravagant parties.
It was obscene.
It's always the way it goes with these guys.
The parties and the price tags for the parties were rather obscene, and they were all being hosted by someone from Wall Street. It was quite perverse. So now that sentiment is there, right? They've been using that for a very long time. You have nowhere else to go. Well, in this election, in a sense, in terms of the two major parties, Trump is not an option. What do you do?
Yeah.
What? Let's talk
Trump,
about you.
For a while there, Trump was. I mean, there was something interesting about Trump before the wheels came off. And what was interesting about him was that in his twisted, sort of upside down way, he was offering a lot of these people somewhere else to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of his raving about the trade agreements. Now, Trump is a fool and a dangerous, a dangerous man, and it's all come apart for him now. But you can easily see how, in different hands, the hands of someone who's like sane, that strategy could work. Against the Democrats for the Republicans. I mean, this is what's the matter with Kansas is all about. It's been working in certain circumstances for years and years and years. They don't know, the Republicans don't offer these these disgruntled white working class people very much. Right. They don't certainly nothing tangible, but they do offer them the culture wars. Yeah. They do give them that. Yeah. And they do, rant and rave about Hollywood and big government and all of this kind of crap, and, talk about your guns and all this sort of thing. And they do give them that.
Yeah. Well, so in the absence of that, right? So now you don't have Trump anymore being, even if for a fleeting moment he was an option, he's becoming even less so as the hours tick by. What do you
It's like every time I turn on the computer, every time I fire up the
it's something else.
One of these news sites. Yes.
Yeah.
Literally every day he's done some new outrage.
He seems to find a way to outdo himself every single day, every single hour. So let me ask you then, in terms of that concept of there's nowhere else to go, what do you say to people who want to vote for Jill Stein, third party, in context of this two-party system and the idea that may chip away and actually help Hillary Clinton? Not Hillary Clinton, but Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on that calculus?
Well, that's, I'm always, I love third-party movements. So this is one of my things. I started out in life, I come from Kansas, and we had a third-party movement there in the 1890s called populism. It was a left-wing, it was a farmer labor kind of movement. They actually had it all over the South, all over the West. It was all over the place except for in the East. And they took over the state in Kansas for a while there, and it really scared the people who own Kansas, the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And so, and populism did this all over the place. By the way, it's a fascinating history, and it's actually still very controversial. You still read all kinds of crap about it, that people get the story wrong in all sorts of ways. But it was a fascinating time. But they used an electoral technique called fusion. You've probably heard of this, where they would basically gang up with one of the other two major parties. So in the South, they would align with the Republican Party. This is in the 1890s. The Republican Party was very small in the South back then. And in the North and in Kansas, they would align with the local Democratic Party to team up against the local dominant party. Anyhow, that was called fusion voting. As soon as the populists had been clubbed down, they made this illegal in all of these states. Illegal. And that ended third parties as a sort of viable tradition in America. You just don't see them popping up after that. You have various efforts by prominent individuals to run for the presidency, right. Like La Follette or what was the guy, the billionaire? Ross Perot, yeah. Yeah, or Ralph Nader, various, prominent individuals running for the presidency, but nobody tries to build a third party after that from the bottom up, or people try, they don't succeed. I would love to see that happen again. I just don't think it's possible without a change in the laws. I mean, there has never been a time when I thought the two-party system was more discredited than right now. It's just... It's loathsome what is going on this year. And this is a year that started out with such promise. I was so proud of Bernie Sanders, of the things he was saying and how he had broken through in a way that nobody has done in a long time. Looked like it was going to be a great year, and now, ooh, it's just every time I turn on the computer, it's something awful. But look, in general, I love the idea of third parties, but they have the eternal problem with third parties is the spoiler problem, that you don't want to vote for the candidate who really shares your views, because then you will, you don't want to vote for, let's say in the year 2000, you don't want to vote for Nader because then you're afraid that Al Gore will lose or something like that.
Right.
And this is a very reasonable fear, and it makes it impossible to build, very, very difficult to build a third-party movement. But fusion voting solved that problem, and it would be nice to see that come back. If we could solve that problem, then I would be really into third parties. I'd go out and work for them. I'd do all sorts of things. Although I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of Democrats out there that I really like.
Yeah. So tell me, and I know, we're coming up at the top of the hour, but I want to get a couple more questions in. What are your thoughts about Jill Stein then? Where do you stand? And, as much as you can discuss it, what are your thoughts about Jill?
She seems like a good person. I haven't studied her or anything like that. As a writer and as a journalist, I've really been focusing on the two big parties so far. But she seems like a good person. Look, if Hillary is miles and miles ahead, that also solves the spoiler problem.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about that anymore if she's going to win in every state or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my thought exactly, right? So she should be, after today's shenanigans, Hillary should be beating with the Second Amendment thing that Donald Trump did today.
Yeah, I saw that.
Hillary.
It's like, what is wrong with this man?
We're trying to figure that out. I'll be honest with you. Hillary should be beating him by 15 points at this point. So I think people should be able to, particularly in definitely in safe states, quote unquote safe states, should be able to feel free to not have that spoiler problem. So one last question I want to ask you is kind of like a big overarching thing, because and kind of a definition. Each person that I speak to, I had a chance to speak with Eddie Glaude Jr., Adolph Reed, and each of time we spoke about neoliberalism.
Adolph Reed is one of my heroes. That guy can see through the bullshit like nobody. He's masterful. He's masterful.
And each of them gave like a working definition of neoliberalism. But for you, you said that you don't really like to use that word.
I don't like to use the word because it confuses people. Because it's a British term. So for the British, the liberals were this 19th century party, with Gladstone and that sort of thing. And they believed in free trade and they believed in laissez-faire economics and that sort of thing. And then they pretty much died out. They were supplanted by the Labour Party, who moved considerably to the left. But that's the British definition. So there, to say neoliberal makes a lot of sense. But here we think of liberals as a Franklin Roosevelt types.
Right.
And to say, you take a guy like Ronald Reagan, who's this sort of, this very neoliberal figure in the British sense, or Margaret Thatcher, they don't seem liberal to us.
Right.
That's all. That's my only problem with it. It's just
So,
but it's.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
But you and I know what it means, so we can use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And my audience, I hit them across the head with it like every other night. So they're getting to the point where they that it's kind of an accepted word, a choice to describe what's going on. But if you could leave us with what is your snapshot definition of neoliberalism, one, and then the bigger question is, how do we begin to fight back against it, or is it even feasible to do so at this point? So how do you define it, and how do you fight against it?
Oh, yes. So I would actually change your definition a little bit, because what I'm interested in these days is Clintonism, which I associate with Bill Clinton, but I imagine Hillary will see a lot of the same kind of thing. Clintonism is exactly what you just described. It's deregulation for Wall Street. It's this, it's what they call "quote unquote" free trade. With NAFTA and permanent normal trade in China and the WTO and this kind of thing. But it's all of these favors for the knowledge industries, as they like to call them, and at the same time, so some people get the carrot and other people get the stick. At the same time, using the heavy hand of the state to punish all of these people at the other end of the spectrum. So you have welfare reform at the exact same time that he is doing all these amazing favors for Wall Street, including bailouts, right? Bill Clinton did this backdoor bailout for Citibank via the Mexican bonds that the Mexican government had been issuing. And they bailed out a hedge fund when Bill Clinton was president. It's not widely remembered anymore, but they did. And at the same time, they're destroying the welfare program, and this enormous private prison roundup that is going on, this mass incarceration thing. That's Clintonism. And that's a kind of, Clinton got a lot of the neoliberal agenda done that the Republicans could not achieve.
Never do. Yeah.
He got all these sort of things. So bank deregulation was something the Republicans really wanted to do, but they couldn't do it, especially repealing Glass-Steagall. I mean, Reagan started chipping away at it, but he didn't get very far. It was Clinton that really did it. There was this whole series of bank deregulations when Clinton was president. And these are things, and the Clinton people, by the way, this is in Listen Liberal, they boasted about this in their internal White House memos. We did what Reagan couldn't do. We got things done that even Reagan could. They were proud of this. And this is what we're looking at. So this is extremely backwards economically, but of course they don't see it that way. They see it as this great advance. It's the knowledge industries. It's it's this wonderful innovation districts and all this kind of thing. And then socially very liberal, but extremely backwards with regards to people who work for a living. And that's Clintonism. And it's coming. It'll be back. I mean, it's on its way. There's nothing stopping it now.
Thomas Frank, the author of the book Listen Liberal, or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I've been a fan of your work for some time, so I was very excited when you were available to come on.
Me as well. Like that goes, I'm a fan of yours as well.
Awesome.
I've been watching you on YouTube for quite a while.
Oh, really? Wow, that's
yeah.
Well, okay, I'm going to be smiling for a little while because I honestly, I love, again, I said it at the top, but I absolutely love reading work that actually explains what I've been grappling with. And with What's the Matter with Kansas, I was grappling with that exact question and you answered it. And with Listen Liberal, I was grappling with the exact question of what the hell is going on with the Democratic Party. And I think you really answered it in a very masterful way. So thank you so much for coming on. I have to get you back so we can just do a full show, a full hour conversation on some deep dives.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Sure thing.
857-600-0518 is the place to call if you want to get in on that. Thomas Frank said he was a fan of mine. How about that? He's been watching my videos on YouTube. All right. How about that? Anyway, I won't smile too much. But anyway, 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. The last thing I'm going to talk about tonight is Michael Brown. One of the reasons I'm actually even doing this show was a conversation. Well, two reasons, but one that's only relevant tonight is a conversation that I had with a classmate named Estime. And we were talking about, we were so frustrated with the fact that he and I and other people like us had been so captured by this system that we could not even think about leaving our homes and our jobs and our families. Well, my family, because Estime is, he's doing his thing, big time. But anyway, we couldn't leave our scenarios to go to Ferguson to protest. Because if I left home and I missed work during that time for 2 weeks or got arrested, then I had a wife and children at home that, we would lose what we had. And we were just trapped inside of this world. And so all we could do was look and see what was going on in Ferguson at the time, and kind of ask ourselves, what do we do? What do we do to contribute to the movement that's happening right now around us? Because all we could do was look. All we could do was watch the news. All we could do was try to sound off on social media, but no one would hear us, because we didn't have any following for people to hear us. So we had voices that were frustrated, but we knew we had to do something. And so we both kind of just counseled each other and said that all we can do is do what we can in the space that we have. And I think above anything else, what happened to Michael Brown challenged so many of us to do whatever we could with the space that we had. And, you know, last year when we talked about it, we talked about the tragedy of the death of Michael Brown. But this year I want to focus on the catalyst, you know, the seed that Michael Brown was. And I don't care what anybody says about Michael Brown as the individual. I don't care what they, what they say about the movement because of Michael Brown's alleged background. I don't care about that, because what matters is the fact that this young man's life meant a lot to people because of the injustice that happened to him. And not only the injustice that happened to him, but the crackdown by the city of Ferguson, the Gestapo-style tactics, the militarization of the suppression of the press. I mean, it was for a week. If you remember the week after Michael Brown was killed, it was such a flashpoint. There was so much unity around opposition to what Ferguson police were doing that even Fox News, go back to the coverage the week that Michael Brown was killed, even Fox News had to speak out against the city of Ferguson because of how Ferguson was clamping down not only on protesters, but on the media. And so for a week there was this unity of voices across the nation because we all saw the injustice. And some of us, like myself and my friends, we realized that we had to find a way to get involved, even though our jobs would not afford us the opportunity to leave and go be on the quote unquote front lines. And so what Michael Brown represents is a flashpoint in American history, whether they want it to be or not. That's the thing. You know, they could try to erase or to establish or to write into history whatever they want about Michael Brown. But for those of us who saw it happening in real time, what happened in Ferguson, what happened to the protesters, what happened that entire, the experiences, the culmination of the experiences all the way from Trayvon Martin to Michael Brown told us that we could not sit by anymore, even if our jobs trapped us, even if our lifestyle trapped us. Every one of us had to find some way to participate in this movement for justice, no matter how small our space was, no matter how small our platform was, no matter where we found ourselves. And that was because of Michael Brown. And I'm doing my show right now because of Michael Brown, because I asked myself, how in the world can I actually affect change instead of always being an observer of what's happening around me? How can I be a participant in what's happening around me? And so shortly after the killing of Mike Brown, he was killed in August, and by that February, I decided that this was the format that I would use to elevate my voice so that I can speak out and to speak truth to power against systems of oppression, against white supremacy, against not just white supremacy, but against economic oppression, against every form of oppression that we come across. I'm doing this because of what happened to Michael Brown. And I know there's a lot of people who are doing what they're doing right now because of Michael Brown, and because of not only him being killed, but because of how the nation responded to people who simply wanted to declare that Black Lives Matter. And so I realized, it is a sad thing when you consider that Darren Wilson, the man who killed Michael Brown, is now essentially a millionaire because of all of the money that was raised for him, because of all the opportunities that have been afforded to him because he killed Michael Brown. And that's cool, right? He's one man who's become a millionaire. But had they known that out of the life and death of Michael Brown, that millions of people would be mobilized to fight back against them, I bet they would think twice. Darren Wilson would reconsider pulling that trigger that day, because the worst thing in the world that could have happened was for him to realize that his actions started an entire movement that will be coming for him and people like him for the rest of our natural lives. We will be fighting against white supremacy. We will be fighting against police brutality. We will be fighting against every type of systemic oppression, both economic and racial, for the rest of our lives. And a lot of us are doing it right now today because of Michael Brown. You guys have a good night.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.